let's move on and do some introductions. So I just wanted to introduce myself. As you will see, I was born and brought up in Manchester, although the accent isn't so much of a giveaway nowadays, but I'm of a certain age where Eric Cantona was a hero. And then I moved down to London. I took up work as an actor, so I worked as a professional actor for a number of years on the stage, in film and TV, radio, you name it, whatever was paying, then I was happy to do it. But after a number of years of that, I found that kind of saying the same lines night after night started to lose its appeal. And I became increasingly interested in the area of digital and how it was transforming people's lives. And so I grew increasingly interested in that area. And over the last few years, running Receptional, I've become increasingly passionate about YouTube and the potential of that channel. And I've been banging on about it for quite a long while now. And so I just wanted to run through some of the reasons why I think YouTube is going to transform the way that marketers run their campaigns in the future, before I hand over to Subir. And I think we need to do that at the moment in context. There's no doubt at all that we're living through kind of some of the strangest times of my business career, and often when things are changing and are volatile in the way they are at the moment, it's important to understand, what are the precedents within the market. And I think there's a nice study from the Harvard Business School, which was published on Harvard Business Review, which I've put here, which I think gives us some context for where we are at the moment and the best ways out of the downturn that we're experiencing. And so the Harvard Business School had looked at the last recession, and they looked at the different strategies that various businesses had used, and tried to understand what would work best during the downturn. So, what was the approach that allowed businesses to come out of that recession not trundling out, but experiencing growth and an upward curve in their businesses. And there were a number of different approaches that businesses took. So some people cut back on their expenses hard and early. Some people took a counter view, which is that if everyone else is pulling back, then we should be doubling down and investing more. And then there's a series of of middle grounds that they looked at as well. So I think there's 4 different approaches that they outlined. And what they found was that businesses that cut hard and early were often the ones that were least likely to come out and experience growth, perhaps because they damaged their businesses as part of those cutbacks. The people who doubled down equally didn't do as well if they just doubled down across the board. What the Harvard Business School discovered, and perhaps this is no great surprise, is that the people who invested intelligently in areas where there was potential for growth were the people who did best out of the last recession when the economy picked up again. So in the short term, what the Harvard Business School says they did was they improved operational efficiency. So just made their businesses more efficient. So that does involve spending less. But it also includes investing in areas where there's potential. And they highlighted R&D and marketing as 2 areas where there is enormous potential for developing those businesses, provided it's done in an intelligent and informed way. And certainly I feel that YouTube sits within that area of marketing where there's enormous potential at the moment that has been untapped in the past. At this point, provided it's affordable to do so, we should be testing and measuring and seeing how YouTube works as a marketing channel for our businesses, so that once the economic upturn comes in, we're ready and prepared to expand upon that activity. So I feel that's how YouTube fits into where we are at the moment. And I'm not saying spend huge amounts on YouTube marketing, but do be testing and measuring over the next few weeks and months if that's affordable. Because there's no doubt that the way that we're watching video content has changed. And I thought it'd be useful before we look at that, as to just to run a poll. And I will launch a poll along the right-hand side now. And I want you to answer these questions if you could do. So let's launch that poll. So I'm asking which channels are you using in your online marketing? And there's a number of options there. I'd ask you to just tick those that apply to you. So it may be that you're doing all of those things, in which case check all of the boxes, or just check the ones that are relevant to you. And I'll give you a few seconds to fill out that poll, because I think that's just useful in terms of gauging which channels are most important to us as marketers, and comparing how active we are on each of those channels. So I can see that people are filling out that poll now, and a number of people are still voting because there's some different options there. But I think it's just useful just to benchmark your activity versus a number of senior marketers from across a number of different industries to see how your performance compares. We've run this poll a number of times at webinars over the last few weeks, and so I think it'd be interesting to compare your results with other people's as well. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to close that poll in 3, 2, 1, and then I will share the results with you. And hopefully what you're seeing on your screens now is the results of that poll. And no great surprise that the vast majority of us are investing in organic search, we're investing in paid search. Generally, that's that's the trend, is that more people are investing in SEO than are investing in paid search. Social media advertising is always popular, and then YouTube generally comes out bottom. So, and as we see, I think that's a missed opportunity, because YouTube can be incredibly cost effective. It can get fantastic results, results that compare to paid search activity nowadays. And I think Subir will talk about that in a bit more detail in a second. And then lots of you are still using email marketing as well. So let me hide those results, but do try to remember some of those numbers. Let me just jot them down. So YouTube is 43%, and email was what, 76%. So I'll hide those poll results, because here's something I don't do very often, but I've set you up slightly there, because what I'm now going to do is to reveal how high net worth individuals are buying online, which are the channels that they're using. So one of the things that we've done in the last few weeks is we've interviewed a number of high net worth individuals, and we've asked them about how they research and buy products and investments online. And as you can see, we're talking about people with £1 million in liquidity and an annual income of at least £80,000 a year. And we chose high net worth individuals because in most businesses, those are the people who it's difficult to get hold of, and those are people who you most want to be buying your products and services, because they can most afford to do so. And so we thought it'd be interesting to see how those people are buying and investing online. And one of the questions we asked them is, how do they research and buy products? Which are the channels that they're using? And the results that you see on your screen there show that, no great surprise here, most people are using search engines. So your investment that you're making in SEO and paid search is likely to be effective. Fewer people are spending time on social media. Fewer people are using print, and then video platforms, which I've highlighted there, is a popular way of finding out information as well. And then email newsletter probably comes bottom of the pile there. I'd included print, which is not in the survey. So just to give you some increasing. Just to give you some context around that as well. But if you think how that compares to where we as marketers are investing, what we see in the surveys that we produce is that generally 80 to 90% of people are investing in paid search and SEO, but sort of 20 to 40% are investing in YouTube. And there's a mismatch there between the amount of content that consumers are consuming versus the amount that we're investing in our marketing. And that just highlights, highlights that, with the results of this survey here. So there's an opportunity, I think, to be investing in YouTube, because that's where people are getting their information from, more than we're investing in our marketing budgets at the moment. And certainly, lots of us are doing email marketing, and yes, it can be very effective, but consumers don't consider that as an important source of information. So hopefully those are useful, a couple of different benchmarks for you there. And then I just wanted to talk about YouTube, why it is that I've become passionate about it over the last few years. And it goes back to kind of, being a child and growing up and watching television on a box that looked like this when there were 3 channels, and comparing that experience to how people are consuming video content today. So there's some data here from Ofcom. And what this data shows is the viewing habits of 18 to 34-year-olds. Again, this is an important audience for many of us, because these are the people who are going to be important customers for us for many years to come. And the fact is that 18 to 34-year-olds spend more time watching YouTube than they do ITV, BBC, Channel 4 and Channel 5 all combined. And when I first saw these figures, I nearly fell off my chair, because I realized, how popular YouTube was, but just not to the extent that it had taken over terrestrial TV as the most popular choice for this age group. And people in their 30s are often kind of prime candidates for many of the products and services that we will offer. So I think that there's a really interesting lesson here in terms of the opportunity with YouTube and the amount of time that we're spending watching YouTube. The fact is that YouTube is probably more popular than you think. And so some more figures here. 92% of UK internet users are on YouTube each month, which is basically everybody. And there are about 10 million app users every day. And to make a comparison there, that's 15 times as many people, 15 times as many people as use BBC iPlayer. So that gives you some sense of the difference between these apps. And I think YouTube is the most popular app on the Apple App Store, as well as being incredibly popular on Android, of course, as well. So YouTube is incredibly popular, and we're watching more than an hour a day on mobile alone at the moment. So incredible numbers of impressions available for us as marketers. Well, why do we go to YouTube? Well, again, this is more Ofcom data. They asked the public, and the public said, well, YouTube is a great place to learn new things. And you may be surprised to hear that the YouTube is more trusted than Google, but also more than the BBC, more than Wikipedia, more than TED Talks, as a way of learning new things. And for me, this is a fantastic opportunity for us to embellish our brand by producing content that helps people to learn new things, and then it engenders trust within our audience. And I think that's a much missed opportunity. If we can create fantastic educational and entertaining content and then promote it to a relevant audience, that's a fantastic brand opportunity. So then moving on, we also asked those high net worth individuals where they were researching, on what devices they were searching. And the fact is that we were surprised that voice devices and smartwatches were so popular, but maybe not surprising when you think about how affluent that audience is. But it's also clear that the amount of time spent on smartphones and tablets far outweighs the amount of time spent on desktop. And I'm not going to bang on about the importance of mobile. You've undoubtedly heard that before. But when we look at how people watch YouTube, it almost exactly mirrors that information. So app watching is 40%, tablet watching is 22%, and those percentages are increasing rapidly when you look back at Ofcom's data over the past few years, and desktop is very rapidly shrinking. And if we look in the mirror and think about the campaigns that we're running at the moment, and I still think many of us would honestly say that our mobile-based campaigns are perhaps not quite as effective as they could be, even though we've been banging on about the importance of mobile for many years. But YouTube does mirror the way in which our audience is watching, so it's a fantastic channel for us to improve our mobile campaigns. And then a final slide from me. As marketers, if we're running big brands, then traditionally we would have been advertising on television. And there's some data here again from Ofcom which just shows the demographics of television-based audiences. And what you'll see is that we've plotted age along one axis and then affluence along the other. And the fact is that if you were advertising on, say, ITV, then that audience tends to be less affluent and it tends to be older than the median profile of the population. Channel 4, I think, is probably kind of the youngest and most affluent of the kind of the commercial channels. But still, on the whole, if we look at how that compares to YouTube, if we plot YouTube on the chart as well, that for those of us who are interested in kind of more affluent individuals and from a younger demographic, because we want to build up our client base over time, then YouTube is the perfect platform. And I think, as Subir will mention in a moment, one of the great advantages of YouTube is you don't have to advertise to that whole population. You can really target your audience in an incredibly granular way. And I think that really is the power of YouTube advertising for me, is that each of us, even if we're not running those big brand TV campaigns, can afford to advertise on YouTube in an affordable way. But I will stop chatting now and I will hand over to Subir for him to tell you in a little bit more detail about those opportunities in YouTube. Subir, are you able to share your screen? Excellent. I'm seeing that in front of me, and I will just turn my webcam off as well.
All right. Thank you so much, Justin. I think after going through your slides, I can definitely say I cannot claim to have more expertise than everyone on YouTube. It seems like you've done your homework really, really well. Just to give a little bit of an intro from my end, I've been working at Google for a little more than 8 years now, so I am a bit of a fossil in the company. Prior to YouTube, I used to work on Google's mobile web initiatives. And as you know, mobile was a huge conversation for us over the last few years, and YouTube uniquely has had that convergence of both fairly mobile first audience as well as a platform that's looking at a significant growth trend in the future. I think Justin really set the base well in terms of helping you understand the nuances within the UK around how much YouTube viewership is growing. But one of the things that I would like to probably share as a piece of advice is that if you as a company or as a marketer are not looking at video in general in a very serious manner, I would say it's a really good time for you to start prioritizing it. One of the reasons for that, and some of you might have already seen this before, is that a Cisco study that was done actually predicts that about 82% of global consumer internet traffic would be on video. And if you are trying to future-proof your business today and you are trying to capitalize on the trends of the future, video needs to be an important voice in your marketing mix. So
Hey, Subir, I think we've just lost your audio.
52% of you might not already be investing in it.
So it sounds like, Subir, like we're losing your audio a little bit at the moment. Can you hear me? But even if you can, we can't hear you.
I might have had some technical issues here. Hi, Justin, can you hear me now?
Yes, I can. But you've come back in again. I think we lost you just to talk about the importance of using video.
Right. Sorry, everyone. Justin and I did discuss that this might happen during the call, just because the Virgin Internet has been a bit spotty over the last few days. Anyway, just carrying on from where I left, what I was talking about was that video in general is a growing trend and something that needs to be more of an important centerpiece if you are planning a marketing strategy today. When we look at that 80% of internet traffic that is going to move towards video, at YouTube, we intend to be at the forefront of that revolution. We already see a massive global engagement on the platform. I know Justin already shared some insights from the UK specifically, but just globally, when we look at how much usage there is on YouTube, there's more than 400 plus hours of video being uploaded every second. As you can imagine, we keep our systems engineers and our network engineers pretty busy with that kind of volume. There are also 1.8 billion people watching a total of 1 billion hours a day just on the platform. So there's an incredible base of logged in users who are hyper focused and hyper bought into the content that's being produced. One of the taglines that YouTube did have was broadcast yourself. So in a lot of ways, the reason why people do come onto YouTube is to find content that is bespoke and that is very relevant to them. So there is a deeper personal connection that a lot of our users have with the platform. And as already was touched upon before, YouTube is capitalizing heavily on the fact that its viewers are also very mobile focused. As you might have seen within the YouTube ad, we keep on making various kinds of changes that sort of help the mobile user experience better over a period of time. And one of the reasons for that is because more than 60% of our views are actually now coming on mobile. Our growth stories in emerging countries is also due to the fact that most people are actually experiencing the internet for the first time on a mobile phone today. So it's incredibly important that YouTube can cater to those customers as well. When we look at sort of beyond the platform and coming a little bit into the framework of advertising, and I had discussed this with Justin earlier, that usually we find a few preconceived notions when it comes to investing in YouTube from an advertiser or from a marketer's perspective. And I've sort of written down a few of those, and these are some of the most common perceptions that I come across when I'm interacting with both advertisers, marketers, and advertising agencies around the world, especially in Europe. And these perceptions are firstly that YouTube is more suited to branding KPIs, and I do see some merit to why people think that way. And that's because just by looking at the viewership numbers, if your sole goal was to get as many eyeballs as possible, you will definitely find that on YouTube. The other piece that I think is a bit of a gripe that I find with performance-oriented marketers is that even with performance goals, YouTube may not be able to produce competitive CPAs. And then lastly, that you need to have supercharged creative, and you need to make incredible investments on creatives to be able to invest in YouTube. Now, throughout the course of this presentation, what I'll try to do is that I'll try to address each of these perceptions and hopefully give you a better understanding that the barrier to entry on YouTube may not be as high as most people might think of it to be. Now, usually I start from a different angle, but knowing that this has been a cause of concern and anxiety for a lot of marketers, I'm starting with this, which is basically a very common perception that I don't have a video today, so let's not talk about YouTube. One of the mantras that my team has for this year is that if you have no creative, that's not going to be a problem. One of the efforts towards which our engineering resources and our product teams are sort of focusing on is building a self-service production tool that will be available in the hands of any marketer. And what that would allow you to do is that if you would just have a few images and a little bit of text, an algorithm will be able to develop a video creative for you within a matter of minutes. Now, this tool, the Video Builder tool, is in a beta right now, but we are accepting whitelists, new whitelists, almost on a daily basis. So if you are interested in using this, do reach out to your Receptional team or towards your Google point of contact, and we'll make sure that you get a chance to use this tool. But like I said, the barrier to entry in terms of using YouTube may not be as high as you might think of it to be, because just a few images and a little bit of text from your end, using this platform, you can have a fairly decent video that can sort of communicate your USPs effectively to the audience you want.
Yeah, so Subir,
there are multiple. Yes.
Oh, sorry, Subir. Sure. Just to interrupt you, I think that's that beta we have access to, and so if anyone's interested, we've got some examples of content that we can share that have been created using that beta, and it really is just a matter of taking some still photographs and writing some text, and then as you can see in the example there, then that does create something that looks very much like a video, and at least it allows you to test the market. In a way that without having to have a Hollywood level production, you can see what sort of response you get from the market by creating a very simple video, and that allows you to decide whether to invest in your Hollywood level production that you want to create later. So I think we found that beta really useful, particularly for people who don't have lots of video content already. Just as a point, so it's worth saying that I can't see all of your slide on the left, so it may be worth kind of just coming out of presentation mode, because I think we're just cutting off some of the text on the left hand side. But yeah, I think that beta is it's really useful from our point of view, and we can share some examples afterwards. Yes, that's better. Thank you.
Okay, perfect. And thanks for pointing that out, Justin, because I do find it to be a fairly common perception that you need to have a Hollywood level creative or an ad that can win a Cannes Lion award to be able to start advertising on YouTube, when actually the average success story on YouTube are mostly ads of in this vein. As long as your campaign setup, your targeting, and the constructs of your campaign have been set up in adhering to best practices, even with a creative that is as sort of value purposed or as utility focused as these creatives tend to do well. When you go into the beta, you'll actually find that we have a variety of templates available that you can use. Some that can sort of focus a little bit more towards introducing your brand. If you have a variety of products or services that you're trying to showcase, there are options available for that. And I know while these look a little bit more e-commerce focused, there are more lead gen focused ads or templates that you'll also be able to find on the platform. Just to share a quick case study of clients that have already started seeing success with this. Thrift Books was one of our early beta testers on the Video Builder pilot, and what they did was that they basically started using this tool to create videos. And because of the multitude of templates that you have, you can often start your campaign with 2 to 3 different versions. And after the initial test, not only did they see a pretty strong result in terms of brand lift, but also an improvement on their CPAs by about 12%. So even without having to overinvest on the creative side, they were able to get a really strong baseline performance on YouTube. And this can often be a nice building case for yourself within your organization or within your company to sort of showcase initial points of success for YouTube, and then you can start dialing up your investment in terms of producing maybe other kinds of videos that can complement this as well. But if you're just looking to get started, I think this will more or less get the job done, and we have more cases where we've found advertisers just using these tools to be able to get effective results. Touching a little bit on that point earlier about YouTube just being focused heavily on the branding efforts, like this is usually the trade-off that most marketers think of, is that if I want to do performance, I'll mostly do search, maybe a little bit of display, and if I want to focus more on branding, perhaps YouTube is the place to be. Now, one of the things that like this siloed sort of approach to advertising fails to consider is that the audience that sits on the left is probably not going to be different from the audience that sits on the right when we talk about the platforms. So when you're trying to reach out to your potential customers, they're not going to be relegated to one single platform. In fact, our own internal research that was done across many countries actually showed that a lot of the search audience and the YouTube audience is actually quite intertwined. And we found that more than 55% of people that search for a product or service on Google actually go on to YouTube to learn a little bit more about it. And you might have seen this at your end as well if you do visit YouTube on a regular basis, that videos that are more oriented towards reviews, videos that are more oriented towards helping someone understand how a product works or how a service is working for them, even things like unboxing videos, like these kinds of videos have actually been on the rise. So oftentimes when it comes to the ability to research a product and making an informed decision, YouTube can play an equally complementary role to search in order to help make up a customer's point of view. Considering this research and the potential of having a highly performance focused audience that is also quite regularly interacting on YouTube, we started working a little bit more towards a format that was oriented towards direct response and probably a little bit more suited to the taste of a performance advertiser. That's where YouTube for Action came in, a format that was built more for direct response. When this product initially came out, its earliest versions were tested out by a handful of advertisers that have actually illustrated here. Um, the majority of the change that really happened over here was basically adding this call to action button along with the ad, and as soon as the ad would end, it would sort of take over the entire viewing screen and sort of project the call to action again. So by these two cosmetic changes, we already started seeing an immense growth in terms of performance metrics from the clients. So for instance, for Pullman Tour Cruises, we saw a 50% higher CTR and a 4x higher conversion rate. And for Masterclass, and I'm sure you must have seen one of their ads by this time, they actually saw a decrease of cost per acquisition of about 24%. And I guess to the naked eye, it might not seem like that big a change, but just the ability for someone to look at a YouTube ad and go onto a website was one of those features that really helped propel their performance objectives further. And we then subsequently tested out the YouTube for Action format across various different KPIs. And what we found was that it was sort of developing an impact that was far beyond just improving CTRs. So when we looked at TrueView for Action against standard TrueView, we obviously saw a decrease in CPAs and an increase in CTR, but we also started noticing that it's positively affecting your search advertising. At an average, we found that advertisers who were running both YouTube for Action campaigns and search campaigns parallelly, they found an 8% bump in search conversions, a 3% bump in search conversion rate, and a 4% decline in CPAs. Of course, there were impact on their brand consideration and purchase intent as well. But this impact that comes on search while running YouTube campaigns is something that a lot of marketers may not consider when they're trying to look at the full value of video. For most of you who do run search campaigns on a regular basis, you would know that your branded search is really where you tend to define your performance the best. Those are the campaigns that you have the lowest CPAs and the best performance rates with. And running YouTube campaigns parallelly to that will actually fuel your brand search interest much further. So if you're at a place where you've noticed that your brand search campaigns have been more or less stagnant in terms of the number of impressions that they're getting on a daily basis, it might actually be helpful to run a YouTube campaign parallelly to just supercharge a little bit of that brand search interest and get it going. Now, when I look at that comparison with search and that inherent link that YouTube has with search, one of the things that is usually the question is, how do I reach the right people based on their intent? Because that's really the value proposition that search brings to the table. And also the fact that if search does such a great job of capturing the users at their highest level of intent, why do I need to invest anywhere else? And a case in point that you might want to consider is that if you're running a search campaign today at a peak efficiency, you'll probably be seeing a 10% click-through rate. So out of every 100 users, you'll probably get about 10 to come to your website. And assuming a 20% conversion rate, which again is absolutely at the highest benchmark, you'll probably have 2 of the 10 that came to your website convert for you. So at any given time, even with peak efficiencies, and by the way, if your campaigns are hitting these kinds of numbers, you deserve a promotion or Receptional deserves a raise. So definitely gun for that.
Subir, some of our campaigns do much better than that.
There you go. So you definitely deserve a raise in that case. So even with these metrics, what you'll find is that 98 out of 100 users are more likely not to come to your website and probably go to someone who's offering the same services as Subir. And that basically leaves you with a huge untapped audience pool that is highly interested in the product or service that you're sort of advertising towards. But even with peak efficiencies, it sort of has its limitations, and search campaigns will miss out on some of those customers. And this is where our cross-platform targeting with YouTube really started making a difference. So early last year, we started testing out this audience pool called custom intent audiences, which basically allowed you to target anyone who has been searching for, say, a particular phrase or a particular set of phrases on Google search and be able to target them on YouTube. So what that basically does for you is that anybody who probably missed out on coming to your website, so basically maybe 90 out of the 100 over here, you could then go and effectively target them on YouTube, perhaps with a much more engaging ad that can talk a little bit more about your services, because probably a video will explain your USPs a little bit better in a little bit more engaging way than just a text ad. And this ability to cross-platform target has made a tectonic shift in the kind of results we've seen from performance advertisers. So earlier, if you were going to target keywords on YouTube, you would only be targeting YouTube's search engine and not Google search engine. So for those of you who have tried out keywords on YouTube before, that's a different audience section. But the custom intent audiences is really what ended up being a game changer for us. And you don't have to take my word for it. I would highly recommend everyone who's attending today to go through this article that was actually published by a marketer who was running a $6 million a year ads campaign on Google. And they were in the SaaS space, which, as many of you might know, is a pretty competitive field to be. And this is just an excerpt that I took out of their section that was basically calling YouTube a hidden gem. But just to go through this, what they were saying was that in the SaaS space they were they paid over $20 per click to bid on competitors' search keywords. And for those of you who are in finance, you might have noticed that often non-branded search keywords can be a little bit on the expensive side. But by using custom intent audience, they could get those clicks for less than $4. And this really goes on to suggest that the ability to cross-platform target can often get traffic to your website at a lower cost, and can be a tool to gain incremental traffic that at peak efficiencies your search campaigns perhaps would not be able to get. And this really is something that's working and pairing up really well with our direct response formats. So we usually never advise anyone to be using YouTube for Action without doing custom intent audience, just because of how much of a performance impact we're noticing out of this. So tip number one, definitely if you're using YouTube for Action as a product and you're not using custom intent audiences yet, make that higher up in your priority list. Do go through this article. I would say it has a ton of interesting insights, and you're probably learning off of someone else's dime. So it's a great way for you to understand how these big marketing budgets were really optimized over a period of time. The other piece that I wanted to call out was that because the custom intent audience list refreshes every 7 days, it also does not go stale. So you're always targeting people who have searched for those keywords in Google in a very recent past. And just because they're coming to your website from YouTube as opposed to search, it doesn't mean that the intent has been diluted significantly. Now, if you're trying to estimate how much of a campaign reach can you be going for by using this kind of a strategy, I have a quick sort of a 3-line criteria that you can use to sort of estimate what are you really missing out on. So if you go to your search ads campaigns today and you look at your lost impression share, that will tell you how many impressions you're losing out on. And then by adding that up with the impressions, by looking at the impressions that you do serve ads on and deducting the number of clicks you're getting on it, you sort of get this pool of search users that you're missing out on a monthly basis. And then that can really form the baseline of what your custom intent audiences look like. One of the cases which I wanted to talk about was Betterment, which is actually sort of a money advice, a financial advising platform. And what they did was that they started using TrueView for Action with custom intent audiences. And post running the campaign, what they found was that their cost per sign-up was actually about 50% lower than branded search, and they had a 245% increase in branded searches themselves. So like I mentioned before, if you are noticing that your campaigns have sort of become stagnant in terms of a brand search interest, YouTube can be a great way to sort of supercharge that. 50% lower than cost per sign up than branded search. It's a very hard sort of metric to beat, and they were able to do that pretty effectively. What I will say is that while that may not be the baseline performance that every YouTube for Action campaign gets, what we have found over the last year or so is that more than 50% of advertisers who are using TrueView for Action and are using the best practices end up getting cost per leads or cost per conversions at a level that is almost at par with non-branded search. So if you can get to that level of profitability, it then becomes a really, really good sort of use case to complement your existing marketing strategy. The other case I wanted to bring up, even though it may not be really related to your vertical, is a company called Marley Spoon. Now, if you've used Dropchef, they're similar to Dropchef. They operate mostly in Australia. And what they had was basically a service that does not tend to get a lot of search interest, right? So not a lot of people are searching for pre-packaged dinner meals. So obviously going search first may not have been the best strategy for them because there's very little interest. And if you do have a product that is quite novel, or has a specific niche, and you do feel that search may not be able to sort of capture the audience that you might want to be going for because there may not be a lot of inherent search interest, you can use a YouTube first strategy like Marley Spoon did. And what they actually ended up doing was that, having run the YouTube for Action campaigns, they had a 103% uplift in website visits, a 9 times increase in brand searches, and a 52% increase in subscriptions. So this really goes on to say that if you have a niche product and you're struggling to find an audience in search, YouTube can often be that complement that you need. Usually, when we look at YouTube targeting, I call this my dream team of targeting. Custom intent audiences is definitely the crown jewel, but if you're just starting off, I would say use custom intent and remarketing, and these will be your, I guess, your first go-to campaign strategies. And then as you start feeling you're achieving more profitability, you can expand into in-market and custom affinity. But these two really need to be the bedrock when you're starting off on YouTube for Action campaigns. Now, I've talked a lot about success stories over here, but let me talk a little bit about failures. So am I trying to say that every YouTube for Action campaign will succeed? Most definitely not. But when we analyze what is leading to the failure of testing when people are using YouTube for Action campaigns, we usually observe 4 sort of levers that contribute towards unprofitability on YouTube for Action campaigns. And I've sort of listed them out for you. The first thing is the tracking piece. So you definitely need to have a Google Ads conversion tracking, because this will allow you to be able to track not only click-based conversions, but also conversions once people have seen more than 10 seconds of your ads. So once they've engaged with the ads, how, if they're opening a new tab, searching for your product and then converting, it will be able to attribute that kind of value. So you need to have Google Ads conversion tracking in place. The other piece is the audiences. Some people tend to overlay multiple kinds of audiences, demographics, this and that, all together in one YouTube campaign. What we advise is that use custom intent and remarketing. If the user has strong enough intent to be looking for your products and services on Google, or has visited your website before, that trumps any kind of demographic sort of insights that you might want to be pushing towards. So if someone is searching and has high enough intent that your search campaign should be catering towards them, then that's good enough for you to have on your YouTube campaigns as well. Make sure that your custom intent audiences has 100 to 200 keywords. The easiest way to do this is just pull all your keywords from your search account and push it into your custom intent audience. The other piece is, and this is not a YouTube specific thing, if you're using Google Smart Bidding in general, you must know this, is give enough of a bid to budget ratio for the algorithms to sort of settle down. It usually takes a week or so for the campaigns to get to the optimal point of profitability. So make sure there's enough budget over there for the smart bidding algorithms to work fine. Again, this is not a YouTube specific thing, it's just a general recommendation with smart bidding for any Google product. And the last one is time. What happens a lot of cases where advertisers do tell us that the campaigns were not performing as per their expectations was probably because within the first 5 days they started making changes. So make sure that once you've set up the campaign, don't make incremental changes because it affects the smart bidding algorithm. But also don't judge the campaign in its first week of performance. Most of the time, if your profitability discussion is taking place after 5 days of running YouTube for Action campaign, I would say that's not the best time to understand how well the algorithm can perform for you. So if you're not looking to do at least a 3 to 4 week test, I would actually advise people not to run YouTube for Action campaigns, just because it's probably not going to be able to showcase the value that it does generate for a lot of these other advertisers that I've touched upon earlier who have seen success with it. So if you're looking to have a quick burst of a week-long campaign, I wouldn't say that this probably is the best format for you. If you're looking for consistent performance KPIs and that's what you're trying to optimize towards, I would say then using these best practices, you can start implementing a YouTube for Action campaign. That's pretty much it from what I had in mind in terms of talking about just some common perceptions about YouTube and what common pitfalls I've seen and some of the success stories. One last thing I will point out is that I did talk about the use case where you may not have a creative at all and you want to get started on YouTube. But if you do have a creative that you feel is fairly usable, we also have support at our end that can sort of help you optimize and sort of give you a little bit of guidance. So you can rely upon that if the need be. If you are planning to invest in creative development in the future, the 2 quick tips I would have for you is if you're trying to advertise on YouTube, your public enemy number 1 is the 5-second skip button. So make sure whatever you're trying to achieve through your creative, it sort of really capitalizes on those first 5 seconds, because that is the portion of your video that is unskippable. So you need to be able to be very direct and be able to communicate your value propositions effectively within that 5 seconds, so as to hold the attention and engagement from your audience. And the second piece, as we've already pointed out countless times, is that you're probably dealing with a very mobile first audience today. So some of these things will be very helpful for you to consider if you're investing in new creatives in the future, is if this is the way your average user is going to see your ad, don't make your texts too tiny that they won't be able to read them. Make it as or large enough so that anybody from a vertical or a horizontal point of view will be able to read it. If you're like me and you're always low on your phone battery, it means that you've probably dimmed your phone a little bit, which means that make sure that you have brighter footage when you're placing your ads. And again, this is a principle for whether if you're in the process of developing new creatives. So make sure the footage is brighter, don't make it too dark and gloomy, because if more people are trying to save their battery life, they'll probably be reducing the screen brightness anyway. And if possible, use faster pacing and cuts. We tend to see ads that get to the point quickly, you can capture the attention quickly in terms of pacing, tend to do a little bit better on YouTube. So if you're in the process of building creatives or you have existing creatives that you want to just do a quick sort of audit on, these are some of the principles that you might want to keep in mind. But that's more or less it from my end. Thank you for your time and your patience and for joining us today. If there are any questions, Justin, I'll be happy to take them after we wrap up the presentation.
Excellent, thank you very much, Subir. Yes, and I would encourage everyone then to say, yes, just to kind of put your questions into the chat box on the right hand side. If you've got specific questions either for myself or Subir, I can see some coming in already. Are you able to see the kind of? Are you able to see my screen now, Subir? Just check.
Yeah, I am.
Yeah. Okay. So, so I think I just wanted to pick up on that case study that you mentioned. After the conversation we had the other day, I went away and read it, and I thought it was, it was a really interesting commentary from a marketer who was working in a space in which I've worked in, which is, which is challenging to say the least, which is kind of B2B, software as a service, products, and it's really difficult marketing in that space. And the marketer in the case study had increased their spend from $3 million to $6 million over the course of a year. And that's easily done, but they've done it based upon performance, so that all of that money was then, all of that increased spend was justified based upon the results that they were getting. And I think that's the interesting thing. It shows the potential, even in very difficult markets, to kind of make a success of advertising on YouTube. And I've just listed the kind of, the four lessons there that they pull out in that case study. And the first they mention is, creative is everything. And I think that is, the lesson that we get from running YouTube campaigns. Yes, we can test with a less sophisticated video products, but over time you should be building towards something that is really engaging and entertaining. And if anyone's interested in creating more video content, then I think some of our friends from hub.tv are on the webinar today, and I'm happy to make an introduction to them because they're a fantastic video creative agency. The second lesson there is, YouTube is still a hidden gem. So here's someone spending $6 million a year, and despite the fact that the whole of the internet is on YouTube, is still saying that YouTube is a hidden gem. And I'd agree with that. And they back up what you were saying about that custom intent audience. And I think there's probably more actually potential than you mentioned there, because I would, for coming from an SEO background, say there's a whole load of keywords that you often can't afford to advertise on in your paid search campaigns, because paid search is, is expensive and competitive. But actually some of them, there's some fantastic search volumes that are relevant audiences that you can advertise on much more cost effectively on YouTube. So I think there's opportunities there that you can investigate within your business. And then the third and fourth points, perhaps less relevant today, but embracing machine learning, which is what you're discussing when you're talking about, creating those videos using machine learning rather than having to have a cameraman. And then Gmail ads, you're being able to scale as well. And I think that's a really good point, which comes back to the survey that we put out at the beginning, which is to say that we want to be advertising and promoting ourselves across a number of different channels, because what our audience tell us is that they're not just looking at paid search or social media or YouTube. They're across all those different channels, and often researching in one place, buying in another, and we need to be present across the board if our marketing is to be effective. And so whether that's YouTube or Gmail ads or email or paid search, having an integrated strategy, I think, is the key to success in today's market. Anyway, so I'm going to stop rabbiting on because we've got some really nice questions coming in. So perhaps I can put those to you. So Hilary, thank you very much for your question. And you've asked about you've asked, as YouTube grows as an advertising channel, do you see it becoming as competitive as Google Ads, or does the journey on the platform make the platform less competitive to serve your ads? So, do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I'm just trying to think of the fact that I don't want to call Google Ads a very expensive platform in general. I do feel that there's space for all kinds of spend levels to find success on Google Ads in general. Specific to YouTube,
I can say that Google Ads can be very competitive. There's because it's got that intent behind it. When someone's searching for something, they want to buy it now. Then of course that as marketers, that's a godsend, and we're willing to pay a certain amount to have have that high intent. But I think there's an interesting question, isn't it? First of all, how does YouTube compare with Google Ads in terms of performance now, from your point of view, and where do you see that going in the future?
Yeah. So I think what's at the crux of the question over here is auction intensity, right? And it's usually a supply and demand question. So if the demand for a certain query is super high, then that tends to drive your auction intensity further. I think what's working in favor of YouTube today is that it just still has a huge headroom to grow in terms of watch time, in terms of viewership numbers. So as that growth engine keeps on getting more engaged users, spending more time on YouTube, finding the content that they like, I wouldn't expect the auction intensity to get crazy. I would say that the ability for people to find more and more new content, and the numbers that you had sort of illustrated earlier, we're actually seeing those watch times grow year over year. So as long as the inventory for YouTube is growing, I would say that we don't expect the auction intensity to sort of become really stiff anytime soon. The caveat to that is that if you're trying to go after a very niche audience that is just hard to find in the internet in general, I guess reaching them is going to be expensive on any platform. But if you're just looking at auction intensity on YouTube as a platform in general, I feel that the growth in inventory in terms of people uploading more content on YouTube, as well as the growth in viewership, is going to keep your advertising at a fairly reasonable price.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I've been banging on about YouTube for the last couple of years, and I've seen it. I mean, I struggle to find people who are following best practice in their ad campaigns and getting the best performance at the moment. So there's plenty of scope. And we saw from the from the poll we did at the beginning that half the people who are on this webinar aren't using YouTube yet. So yes, it may become more competitive, but there is still plenty of scope within the market. And I would say at the moment, within the last few weeks, the figures that Google have shared with us suggest that advertising costs are coming down because people are pulling back spend. And at the same time, the number of impressions is going up. So I think within the first 2 weeks of lockdown, there was 20% more impressions available and fewer people advertising. And we saw advertising costs drop from maybe 5p a view down to 1p a view. So I mean, I don't want to be somewhat opportunistic, but now is a good time to be testing while the market is perhaps quieter and fewer advertisers. So hopefully that's useful, Hilary. A question from Vic, which is, what's the minimum spend per day on YouTube? Is there a minimum spend?
No, I mean, you can get started on $1 a day if you wanted to. However, I wouldn't suggest that kind of a budget. What I will say is that, especially if you're trying to run a YouTube for action campaign or something that's more relevant to a performance KPI, then you should ideally follow the smart bidding principles that I was sort of talking about a little earlier, which basically says that your starting budget should be anywhere from 5 to 10x of your non-branded search CPA, if that's the benchmark we want to set. So give that much room to the campaigns for the algorithm to sort of optimize themselves. I guess you should really look at your current CPAs that you're getting on your search account and model your YouTube budgets accordingly.
Cool. Thank you very much, Subir. And then another question from Norbert, who's clearly been running some campaigns. And the question there, is it recommended to start with a target cost per acquisition? So understanding how much you want to spend per customer. Or is it better to start with maximize conversions when you're running a new YouTube campaign?
Yeah, so I would say that it would also depend on the KPI that you have. So say if you're only going to run like a 4-week YouTube campaign and you have a certain amount of impressions you want to hit and a certain amount of clicks that you want to give, then max conversions is probably the better way to go. Target CPA is more of a risk-averse bidding method, whereas max conversion is a little bit more aggressive. So if you're very sensitive about your margins and your CPAs, just like you would use target CPA in the search version, I would say it's better to start off with TCPA if you're trying to really be protective of the margins and you're not too concerned about the volumes as of now. But if your intention is to really sort of supercharge the volume that you're trying to drive out of your YouTube campaigns, max conversions is a better way to go. I have found some advertisers who have tried to hack their way through the learning curve a little bit. So what they do in the first 5 to 6 days, they switch on max conversions so that the system gets a huge volume of data to sort of optimize against, and then they switch it over to target CPA, and then they start sort of protecting the margin. So I have seen those cases as well, but broadly speaking, if you're looking for more volume, then you should go for max conversions. And if you're more risk averse and you're trying to get you're trying to protect margins, I think target CPA is the way to go.
Excellent. So the target CPA will keep the finance director happy, and maximize conversions will keep the sales director happy. So it depends who your audience is. Excellent. Thank you.
Absolutely. One thing I will say is that, like, if you're starting off on target CPA, then give it a little bit more of a bandwidth than your say your non-banded search CPA. And once you've sort of hit that level, you can start decreasing it by 10% each week. It's very similar to what we recommend on search. So once you've sort of hit that target CPA goal, I think after the first 2 weeks, you can then start sort of decreasing that in increments of 5 to 10%.
That ties in with what you were saying earlier, which is basically don't start your campaigns unless you've got enough time to optimize them, because you will be able to reduce your costs over time and get to kind of a really nice model that means that you're getting new business at a good cost-effective price. So then one final question from Zoe, if that's okay.
Yeah.
So Zoe's question is, do you always need fresh video content, or can you use the same content for different campaigns over time?
Yeah, that's a good question. I would say it depends on the offerings from your business and the offerings that are being communicated within the video. So if you feel that you have a pretty standard offering that doesn't really change that much, then I think your creatives using the same creative is fine. I think with the video builder tool, you also now have the option to create multiple templates, so you can sort of have a fresh creative. Or if you're trying to do something that is a little bit more deadline oriented, say if hypothetically you're a flower company that wanted to run a Mother's Day campaign, but you only have a week left, you could use something like Video Builder and churn out a few creatives. By and large, I think not being able to make new creatives every time is not usually a problem, as long as the audience you're targeting isn't the same audience that's sort of getting repeatedly bombed with the same message. So if you're using something like custom intent audiences, where the list gets refreshed every 7 days, using the same creative is fine. It's always good to, I guess, get a creative specialist, or maybe someone at Receptional or someone at Google to sort of just comb through your ad a little bit and see if there are pieces that can be optimized a little bit. Some of the mobile best practices that we talked about, I find a lot of advertisers not following them. So just combing them through some of those best practices and optimizing towards them, I guess, is always a good thing to do. Otherwise, if it ain't broke, don't fix it, is what I'd say.
Excellent. I would back that up. So I would say absolutely make sure that you've got the right content for YouTube, particularly for mobile devices. So creating videos that are right in the first place will mean that you don't then need to replace them, because performance will be good. I think with things like custom intent audience, where you're tapping into the searches on Google and targeting people who've searched for a particular keyword that's relevant to you, then there'll be a constant stream of new people coming in who've searched for that keyword. And so I think when you're advertising on Facebook, you tend to need to create new creatives the whole time, because you're fishing in a pool. When you're fishing on YouTube, you can fish in a river, because you've got new people coming into YouTube the whole time who searched for particular keywords. So I think it is much easier on the content. You don't need to be refreshing quite so often as say if you're working on Facebook. So hopefully that is helpful, Zoe. So thank you very much for Subir, for your time today and presenting so eloquently. So thank you. If anyone does have any questions that they want to follow up with, then please email me at Receptional, and happy to answer any questions that you have, whether that's today, tomorrow, or 3 weeks' time. That's part of the reason why we run the webinars in the first place. I would be no kind of marketer at all if I didn't make you an offer while we're here today. And what I would say is, if anyone's interested in advertising on YouTube, then over the next few weeks during May, we've got a couple of slots when we can we put aside time to put together a YouTube campaign that suits your business. And that's looking at the creative, but also the targeting methods and the keywords that you might want to target alongside the audience that's relevant for you. So we're happy to put that together for anyone who's interested today. Again, just email me afterwards. My details are on the screen now, so please do get in touch. And then a final thing is that in about an hour's time, everyone who attended today will receive an email from me, which will have a link to a survey in there. And I'd be extremely grateful if you're able to fill that out and give us your feedback on today's presentations, what you found useful. But actually, I'm more interested in kind of knowing either stuff that didn't come across clearly that we can improve on, or areas that you'd like to know more about in the future. And so when we run future events, we can make sure that the content that we're creating is just right for you. So thank you very much, everyone, for attending. Subir, thank you again for your time and your fantastic presentation. And I would just say, everyone, stay healthy and stay well.
Thank you. Bye.
Cheers, Subir. Thank you very much. Thank you, everyone.